The council chamber of the Galactic Assembly hung in the void between stars, a massive structure of crystalline walls and flowing energy fields. Within its vast halls, representatives from 800 civilizations gathered to discuss matters of peace, trade, and the occasional threat to galactic stability. Today's session, however, would be remembered for centuries as the moment when wisdom was offered and foolishness chosen. Elder Mothkar of the Ascended Seers stood at the central podium, his ancient form wrapped in robes that seemed to shift between dimensions. His species had existed for over 3 million years, and they had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. When the seers spoke, most species listened. Most, but not all. "Honored delegates," Mothkar began, his voice carrying a weight that came from millennia of accumulated knowledge. "I stand before you to deliver a warning about a species that has recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They call themselves humans, and they originate from a world they name Earth in the Sol system." A ripple of indifference passed through the assembly. New species achieved FTL travel every few decades. It was hardly newsworthy. Ambassador Krell of the Vardaxian Empire, a species that prided itself on military might and territorial expansion, let out what might have been a laugh. His armored form shifted in his seat, and his translator picked up his words clearly. "Another primitive species stumbles into the stars. Why should we concern ourselves with beings who have barely learned to leave their own star system? The seers waste our time with this nonsense." Mothkar's multiple eyes focused on Krell, and for a moment, the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. "Your dismissal is noted, Ambassador. It is also expected. The young and powerful always believe they know better than those who have walked the paths of time." He turned back to the assembly, his form seeming to grow larger, more substantial. "I have looked into the paths of probability. I have consulted the ancient texts that record the patterns of galactic history. I have meditated in the void between moments. And in all my searching, one truth emerges with terrifying clarity. Humanity is not like other species that have joined the galactic community. They are dangerous in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Commander Xylith of the Coherence Fleet, representing one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, spoke up. Her crystalline body refracted the chamber's light into countless colors. "Dangerous? Elder Mothkar, with respect, we have reviewed the information available on this species. They are fragile. Their bodies break easily. They require specific atmospheric conditions and temperature ranges to survive. They have fought wars among themselves for their entire recorded history. They are divided, weak, and fractious. What danger could they possibly pose to civilizations that have mastered dimensional physics and quantum manipulation?" Mothkar's response was patient, but firm. "That is precisely why they are dangerous, Commander. You look at their physical limitations and see weakness. You observe their conflicts and see division. But you fail to understand what these characteristics have created." He activated a holographic display that showed Earth rotating slowly in the darkness of space. It was a beautiful world, blue and green and white, wrapped in swirling clouds. It looked peaceful. It looked harmless. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them at every opportunity," Mothkar explained. "Their planet experiences regular catastrophic climate shifts, ice ages that cover continents, volcanic eruptions that blot out the sun, earthquakes that reshape land masses, storms that can flatten entire regions, and yet they survived. More than survived, they thrived." The hologram shifted to show Earth's diverse ecosystems: scorching deserts, frozen tundras, dense jungles, towering mountains, deep oceans. They spread to every environment on their world. Places where no single organism should be able to exist, they adapted and conquered. They are not specialized for one environment. They are generalists of the highest order. Ambassador Krell snorted. Adaptability is hardly unique. Many species can survive in various environments. Can they? Mothkar challenged. The Vardaxian Empire spans 50 star systems, Ambassador. But each of your colony worlds has been terraformed to match your homeworld's exact specifications. Humans require no such luxury. They will live anywhere. They will eat anything. They will build wherever they land. He changed the hologram to show human history. Cities rising and falling, empires expanding and collapsing, wars that consumed entire continents. You say they are fractious and divided. You say they fight among themselves. This is true. But consider what this means. For 10,000 years, they have been refining the art of warfare against opponents who think exactly like they do. Every strategy has been countered, every weapon has been improved, every tactic has been tested against enemies who are just as clever, just as determined, just as innovative as they are. The hologram showed human soldiers in various eras, ancient warriors with bronze weapons, medieval knights in armor, modern soldiers with advanced technology. They have never known a moment of true peace. They have been in a state of continuous evolution through conflict. And now, they are bringing that experience to the stars. Delegate Fricks of the Harmonious Collective, a peaceful species known for their diplomatic skills, spoke gently. Elder Mothkar, surely you do not suggest we should fear a species simply because they have a violent history. Many civilizations pass through aggressive phases before reaching enlightenment. The humans may simply need guidance, understanding, and time to mature. Mothkar's expression, difficult to read on his alien features, seemed almost sad. Your compassion does you credit, Delegate Fricks. It is one of the many reasons the collective has thrived. But compassion without understanding is merely wishful thinking. He pulled up new data. Humans possess something we call persistence hunting. Before they developed advanced tools, they would select prey and simply follow it. Not chasing, just walking. The prey would run, tire, rest. The humans would catch up. The prey would run again. This would continue for hours, sometimes days. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would claim their meal. This is their nature, Mothkar continued. They do not give up. They do not surrender. They do not know when they are beaten. I have seen the paths of probability, and in scenario after scenario, they achieve victory not through superior strength or technology, but through sheer unwillingness to accept defeat. Commander Xylith's crystalline form pulsed with skepticism. The Elder is engaging in speculation and fear-mongering. We have first contact protocols for a reason. The humans will be evaluated, guided, and integrated into galactic society like every other species before them. There is no need for this dramatic warning. Is there not? Mothkar asked quietly. He pulled up another display, this one showing human literature, art, and entertainment. Tell me, Commander, how many species in this assembly have created fictional works about destroying themselves? About apocalyptic scenarios? About extinction-level events? Silence greeted his question. Humans are obsessed with their own potential destruction, Mothkar explained. They write stories about nuclear war, about artificial intelligence turning against them, about alien invasions, about plagues, about environmental collapse. They imagine every possible way they could die, and then they create plans to survive anyway. They prepare for the worst constantly. It is embedded in their culture. He changed the image to show human space programs. They sent messages into space knowing full well that any response could be from a hostile civilization. They launched probes beyond their solar system with maps showing the location of their homeworld. They broadcast radio signals into the cosmos for over a century. When their own scientists warned them about the dangers of alerting potential predators to their location, they debated it and continued anyway. They are either monumentally foolish or supremely confident, Ambassador Krell observed. They are hopeful, Mothkar corrected. And that hope is perhaps their most dangerous quality. They believe, against all evidence and logic, that things will work out, that they will survive, that they will prevail, and this belief drives them to attempt things that sensible species would never risk. He pulled up images of human space stations, ships, and settlements. They have been capable of space travel for barely a century, and already they have established permanent presence beyond their world. They have sent robots to explore their neighboring planets. They have plans to colonize their moon, their nearest planets, and eventually other star systems. They move with a speed that suggests either recklessness or extraordinary drive. Delegate Fricks spoke again, still gentle but now with a hint of concern. Elder, you paint a picture of a species that is hardy and determined. But surely the solution is engagement? If we bring them into the fold now, while they are still young and impressionable, we can guide them toward peaceful coexistence. Moth Carr turned to face the delegate directly. That is what I fear most of all. Not that we will treat them as enemies, but that we will treat them as children. They are not children. They are something else entirely. He activated a final hologram, this one showing probability streams, complex mathematical models that only the most advanced species could interpret. I have run the simulations countless times. In scenarios where we welcome them openly, they study our technology, our culture, our weaknesses. In scenarios where we restrict them, they find ways around our restrictions. In scenarios where we ignore them, they expand anyway. In scenarios where we attempt to subjugate them, they resist with a ferocity that costs us dearly. And in scenarios where we attempt to eliminate them, Commander Xylith asked, her tone suggesting she considered this a viable option. Moth Carr's response was immediate and chilling. We fail. In every simulation where extermination is attempted, we fail. They scatter, they hide, they rebuild, and then they come back. Not with anger, though that would be present. Not with vengeance, though they certainly feel that emotion. They come back with cold, calculated determination to ensure they can never be threatened that way again. The chamber fell silent. Even Ambassador Krell seemed to be reconsidering his earlier dismissal. "What do you propose, Elder?" asked Chancellor Vex of the Core Worlds Alliance, an elder statesman who had been silent throughout the presentation. "If they are as dangerous as you suggest, and if we cannot eliminate, contain, or ignore them, what course of action remains?" Moth Carr's form seemed to shrink slightly, as if the weight of his words was heavy even for him. "I propose we prepare, not for war, though that may come, not for subjugation, for that will surely fail. I propose we prepare for a future where humanity plays a significant role in galactic affairs, whether we wish it or not." "You are saying we should simply accept their rise?" Commander Xylith asked incredulously. "I am saying we should understand what is coming," Moth Carr replied. "The humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Perhaps we should learn from their wisdom." Ambassador Krell stood, his massive form dominating his section of the chamber. "This is absurd. The Council of Seers expects us to be afraid of a species that has not even left their own star system, a species that still fights among themselves. I will not waste the Vardaxian Empire's resources preparing for a threat that exists only in the fevered imagination of ancient mystics." Several other delegates murmured agreement. The idea that a newly FTL-capable species could pose any real threat to established galactic powers seemed laughable to many present. Moth Carr looked at each delegate in turn, his ancient eyes seeming to pierce through to their very essence. "Then my warning is delivered and rejected. When the time comes, remember this moment. Remember that you were told." With that, he stepped down from the podium and slowly made his way toward the exit. As he walked, Delegate Fricks approached him quietly. "Elder, I wish to believe you, but your warnings seem so dire. Is there truly no positive path forward with humanity?" Mothkar stopped and turned to the delegate. I did not say there was no positive path. I said they were dangerous. The ocean is dangerous, yet it sustains life. Fire is dangerous, yet it provides warmth. Humanity is dangerous. But that does not mean they will be our doom. It means we must be careful, thoughtful, and above all, respectful. Will anyone heed your warning? Fricks asked. The elder's response was sad but accepting. Some will, most will not. That is the way of things. The young and powerful always believe they know better, until they learn otherwise. As Mothkar departed the council chamber, he carried with him the burden of foresight without the power to change the course of events. He had seen the paths of probability, and he knew that his words today would be remembered, but only later, only after the cost of dismissing them had been paid. In the chamber behind him, the delegates moved on to other business. The warning about humanity was noted in the official records and then largely forgotten. After all, they had real concerns to address. Trade disputes, border conflicts, resource management. Why waste time on a species that had barely achieved FTL travel? In the Sol system, humanity remained unaware that they had been discussed at all. They continued building, exploring, dreaming, and reaching for the stars with that characteristic mix of hope and determination that made them both endearing and terrifying. The stage was set. The warning had been delivered and dismissed, and the future that Elder Mothkar had foreseen began its slow, inexorable approach. 20 standard cycles had passed since Elder Mothkar's warning, and the galaxy had watched with mild interest as humanity made its first tentative steps into the greater community. They had established embassies on neutral stations. They had begun trading their unique cultural artifacts for technology and knowledge. They had asked endless questions, always curious, always learning. To most observers, they seemed harmless enough if somewhat peculiar. Captain Vraltesh of the Vardaxian Imperial Fleet remembered the council meeting where the seers had issued their warning. He had been a junior officer then, present only because he was serving as an aide to Ambassador Krell. Now he commanded one of the Empire's newest dreadnoughts, the Crimson Fang, and he had been assigned to patrol the border regions where human space met Vardaxian territory. The assignment was considered a backwater posting, a quiet sector where nothing of consequence ever happened. Vraltesh had accepted it with the resignation of a career officer who understood that not every assignment could be prestigious. At least the humans were interesting to observe, even if they posed no real threat. His opinion began to shift during what should have been a routine patrol. Captain, we are detecting unusual activity in the asteroid field at Grid 774, his sensor officer reported. It appears to be a human mining operation. Vraltesh brought up the display. Sure enough, a small fleet of human ships was working through an asteroid field that lay just barely within territory the Vardaxian Empire claimed but had never bothered to utilize. The asteroids were rich in heavy metals, but the field was difficult to navigate, and the Empire had more accessible resources elsewhere. Hail them, Vraltesh ordered. Inform them they are operating in Vardaxian space without authorization. The communications officer worked for a moment before responding. They are replying, Captain. Audio and visual. A human face appeared on the screen. She was middle-aged by their standards, with gray streaking through her dark hair and the kind of weathered appearance that came from years of hard work in space. Her expression was pleasant but not subservient. This is Manager Sarah Chen of the Frontier Mining Cooperative. We received your message. I'm afraid there might be some confusion about territorial boundaries. Vraltesh kept his voice level and authoritative. There is no confusion. You are in Vardaxian space. You must cease operations and depart immediately. Chen's expression didn't change. With respect, Captain, we checked the territorial registries filed with the Galactic Assembly before beginning operations. This region was listed as unclaimed space. We filed our own claim 3 standard months ago, as per established protocols. The Vardaxian Empire claimed this system 40 cycles ago, Vraltesh replied, feeling the first stirrings of irritation. I understand that, Chen said calmly, but according to Galactic Assembly regulations, territorial claims must be renewed every 25 cycles and must demonstrate active utilization or intent to utilize. The Vardaxian Empire's claim expired 3 cycles ago and was not renewed. Vraltesh checked with his navigation officer, who confirmed with obvious embarrassment that Chen was correct. The Empire had simply forgotten about this remote region, assuming no one else would want it. It was a bureaucratic oversight, nothing more. That may be technically accurate, Vraltesh said, but the Empire has held this region for decades. You would be wise to withdraw your claim and avoid diplomatic complications. Chen tilted her head slightly. Captain, we've invested significant resources into establishing this operation. We have contracts to fulfill and people depending on this income. If the Vardaxian Empire wishes to contest our legitimate claim, they can file an appeal with the Assembly. Until then, we will continue working. You would risk confrontation over rocks in space? Vraltesh asked, genuinely puzzled. These rocks represent rare earth elements that are valuable for manufacturing, Chen explained. And yes, we would defend our legal right to them. But I don't think it needs to come to that, do you? We're all civilized beings here. Vraltesh considered his options. He could force the issue, drive the humans out with threats or action. But if they had filed a legitimate claim, that would create a diplomatic incident that would reflect poorly on him. The Empire's oversight was not the humans' fault. Continue your operations, he finally said, but be aware that the Empire will be watching this region more carefully in the future. Chen smiled. We appreciate your understanding, Captain, and if your ships ever need repairs or supplies while patrolling out here, we'd be happy to offer assistance. We maintain good facilities. The communication ended, and Vraltesh sat back in his command chair, unsettled. The human had been respectful, but completely unbending. She had known the regulations better than he did, and had used them to her advantage. Most new species were intimidated by established powers. The humans seemed merely careful and prepared. Over the following cycles, Vraltesh encountered more examples of human behavior that didn't quite match his expectations. A human merchant vessel that outran 3 of his patrol ships through a debris field that should have been impassable. A human diplomatic team that negotiated a trade agreement with terms so complex his analysts needed weeks to find the advantages the humans had quietly built into the contract. A human science ship that politely but firmly refused to share their scanning data of a nebula, citing proprietary research exemptions. None of it was hostile. All of it was perfectly within the bounds of galactic law. But there was a pattern emerging, and Vraltesh found himself thinking about Elder Mothkar's warning with new understanding. The incident that truly changed his perspective occurred near the border of what humans called the Kepler sector. Vraltesh had been tracking what his sensors identified as a human military vessel. It was smaller than his dreadnought, less heavily armed, but it was clearly a warship rather than a civilian craft. He had observed it for several hours, noting that it was conducting what appeared to be survey operations along the border, not crossing into Vardaxian space, but definitely gathering intelligence about Imperial ship movements and patrol patterns. When he finally decided to make contact, the response surprised him. This is Commander James Rodriguez of the UES Defiant. Good afternoon, Captain Vraltesh. We've been aware of your presence for about 6 hours now. Your ship has an interesting thermal signature. Vraltesh felt a chill. They had detected his vessel and tracked it for 6 hours without giving any indication they knew he was there. The Crimson Fang was equipped with advanced stealth systems. No recently spacefaring species should have been able to penetrate them. You have been conducting surveillance operations along our border, Vraltesh stated, deciding to be direct. We've been conducting navigational surveys and scientific observations in unclaimed space, Rodriguez corrected politely. If you're concerned about operational security, I should mention that most of your patrol routes follow predictable patterns. No disrespect intended, but your fleet could benefit from more randomization in its movements. You presume to advise the Vardaxian Imperial Fleet? Vraltesh asked, his tone dangerous. Rodriguez's expression on the view screen remained neutral. Not advising, Captain. Just observing. We make it a point to understand our neighbors. Knowledge promotes stability. Or provides advantages in conflict, Vraltesh countered. That too, Rodriguez admitted. But we prefer the stability option. Conflict is expensive, dangerous, and unpredictable. We'd rather understand each other well enough to avoid it. There was something in the human commander's tone that made Vraltesh pay closer attention. Not fear, exactly, not even concern. More like pragmatic assessment. The humans were preparing for the possibility of conflict while preferring to avoid it. They were hoping for the best while preparing for the worst. The Vardaxian Empire does not fear humanity, Vraltesh said, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. I would never suggest you should, Rodriguez replied. Fear is rarely useful. Understanding, on the other hand, is invaluable. For what it's worth, Captain, we don't fear the Vardaxian Empire either. But we do respect it, and we've studied it carefully. After that exchange ended, Vraltesh spent hours reviewing all the intelligence his fleet had gathered on human activities. The picture that emerged was unsettling. Humans were expanding faster than any species in recent memory. They were establishing colonies in systems other species had deemed too difficult or too marginal. They were building infrastructure at a pace that suggested they expected to need it sooner rather than later. Most telling were the defensive installations they were constructing. Nothing that violated galactic law or suggested aggressive intent, but every human settlement had redundant defenses, backup systems, and contingency plans. They were building their new civilization as if they expected it to be tested. Vraltesh compiled his observations into a report and sent it up the chain of command. He referenced Elder Mothkar's warning from 2 decades prior and suggested that perhaps the seers had been correct to be concerned. The response from Imperial Command was dismissive. Captain Vraltesh, your report reads like the work of someone who has been in deep space too long. The humans are industrious and somewhat paranoid, but they pose no credible threat to the Empire. Focus on actual security concerns rather than philosophical speculation. Frustrated but duty-bound, Vraltesh continued his patrols. But he also began doing something that was unusual for a Vardaxian military officer. He started reading human literature, studying their history, and trying to understand how they thought. What he discovered both fascinated and disturbed him. Humans had a concept they called Murphy's Law, the idea that anything that could go wrong would eventually go wrong, and therefore one should always have backup plans. They had dozens of similar sayings and proverbs, all centered around the same theme. Prepare for disaster, because it will come eventually. Their military doctrine reflected this philosophy. Every strategy had contingencies. Every plan had alternatives. They didn't just consider what might go wrong. They assumed something would go wrong and prepared accordingly. He found records of human military history and was stunned by what he read. They had developed nuclear weapons and nearly destroyed themselves, then created elaborate systems to prevent such destruction while keeping the weapons ready. They had fought wars where millions died, learned from those horrors, and developed conventions to limit future damage while still maintaining the capability for warfare. They were, he realized, a species that had learned to live with danger as a constant companion. They didn't expect safety. They didn't assume peace. They hoped for both, but prepared for neither. Commander Xylith of the Coherence Fleet had reached similar conclusions through different observations. Her assignment was scientific cooperation, working with human researchers on various projects. She had expected to find them innovative but technologically behind. Instead, she found them creative in ways that made her uncomfortable. The humans didn't just learn the technology that was shared with them. They understood it, adapted it, and often found applications that the original creators had never considered. A coherence communication device designed for ship-to-ship contact was modified by human engineers to work as a deep space probe controller. A medical scanner was reverse-engineered and improved to detect structural flaws in buildings. "How did you know this modification would work?" Xylith had asked a human engineer who had just demonstrated a significant improvement to one of her people's energy collection systems. The engineer, a young woman named Dr. Patel, had shrugged. "We didn't know it would work. We just thought it might, so we tested it." "You experimented with advanced technology without fully understanding the theoretical foundations." Xylith had been horrified. "We understood enough to make educated guesses," Patel explained. "Sometimes practical experimentation reveals things that pure theory misses. We learn by doing." This approach was antithetical to how the coherence operated. They calculated, simulated, and modeled everything before attempting it. The humans just tried things, and disturbingly often, their approach yielded results. Xylith compiled her own report and sent it to the Coherent Central Authority. She pointed out that human innovation was proceeding at a rate that would allow them to match Coherent's technology levels within 2 generations, possibly sooner. She recommended closer monitoring and more careful control of what technology was shared with them. The response was more thoughtful than the one Vraltesh had received, but still fundamentally dismissive. "Commander Xylith, your concerns are noted. However, all developing species show rapid advancement when exposed to more sophisticated civilizations. This is expected and normal. Continue your observations, but avoid alarmist assessments." Delegate Fricks of the Harmonious Collective had the most direct interaction with humans through diplomatic channels. She found them charming, frustrating, and utterly exhausting. They negotiated everything, constantly sought advantages, and remembered every detail of every agreement. But they were also honest, at least in their own way. They clearly stated their interests and defended them vigorously, but they also honored their commitments and acknowledged when others had valid points. What struck Fricks most was their emotional intensity. Humans felt things deeply. Joy, sorrow, anger, love, all of it seemed amplified compared to most species. They could be moved to tears by poetry or art. They could become passionate defenders of causes they believed in. They could also become furious when they felt wronged. This emotional nature made them unpredictable in negotiations. A human diplomat might be perfectly reasonable for hours, then suddenly become intractable over what seemed like a minor point because it touched on something they cared deeply about. Fricks learned to navigate these emotional currents, and in doing so, she came to understand something important. Humans didn't separate logic from emotion the way most species did. They integrated both into their decision-making. They could be coldly rational when needed, but they were guided by what they felt was right, not just what was efficient or beneficial. She wrote her own report, though hers was more optimistic than those of Vraltesh or Xylith. She suggested that humanity could become valuable allies if approached correctly, understanding their unique psychology and working with it rather than against it. The collective's response was encouraging but cautious. They agreed to continue engagement but suggested that Fricks might be becoming too sympathetic to the human perspective. As the cycles passed and humanity continued its rapid expansion and integration into galactic society, these 3 observers found themselves thinking more and more about Elder Mothkar's warning. The old seer had been right that humans were different, though none of them were ready to admit publicly that they might be dangerous. Then came the incident that would change everything. It started with a distress call from a research station in the outer reaches, far from any major civilization. Pirates had attacked, something that happened occasionally despite galactic law enforcement efforts. What made this incident significant was that the station had both human and alien researchers. When the distress call went out, the nearest response-capable vessel was human. The UES Valiant, a destroyer that had been conducting anti-piracy patrols in the region. Captain Vraltesh listened to the recorded communications traffic with growing amazement. The Valiant's captain had immediately responded and set course at maximum speed toward the research station. When informed that the pirates outgunned his ship significantly, the human captain's response had been simple. Understood. Proceeding anyway. The Valiant arrived to find 3 pirate vessels in the process of looting the station. Against logical odds, the human destroyer engaged all 3. The battle that followed was recorded by the station's external sensors and would be studied in military academies for years to come. The human ship should have been destroyed. Instead, it danced through the combat zone with a combination of reckless courage and precise skill that seemed impossible. It targeted not to destroy, but to disable crippling engines and weapon systems while avoiding fatal strikes. Within 20 minutes, all 3 pirate vessels were drifting, their crews stunned that they had been bested by a single smaller vessel. When Vraltesh reviewed the tactical analysis, he realized what had happened. The human captain had done everything wrong according to standard military doctrine. He had taken risks no sensible commander would accept. He had put his ship in danger repeatedly. He had sacrificed defensive positioning for offensive opportunities. But he had won. Against superior force, he had won. And he had done it not through better technology, but through audacity, creativity, and an apparent willingness to risk everything to protect those researchers. The incident sent ripples through galactic military circles. Humanity had been involved in minor skirmishes before, but this was the first time they had demonstrated what they were truly capable of when pushed. It was impressive, alarming, and deeply unsettling to those who had dismissed them as insignificant. Elder Mothkar, now nearly ancient even by seer standards, heard about the incident in his meditation chambers. He did not say, "I told you so." He simply noted it as another data point in the pattern he had foreseen. The galaxy was beginning to understand, though slowly and reluctantly, that humanity was not like other species. They were something new, something that didn't fit into established categories, and they were here to stay. The crisis that would validate Elder Mothkar's warning came not from humanity, but from the ancient darkness between stars. The Devourer fleet, as they came to be known, emerged from the void beyond charted space. They were a mechanical intelligence, self-replicating machines that consumed entire worlds to build more of themselves. They had destroyed civilizations before and left only silence in their wake. The Galactic Assembly received the first reports with shock that quickly turned to terror. An entire colony world on the frontier had gone silent. When scout ships investigated, they found nothing but debris. The planet had been stripped down to its core. Every useful atom converted into more machines. Emergency sessions were convened. Military forces were mobilized. But the Devourer fleet moved faster than anyone expected. Within 3 standard cycles, 5 more worlds had fallen. The machines adapted to every weapon used against them, learned from every tactic employed. They were relentless, efficient, and seemingly unstoppable. Captain Vraltesh found himself commanding a Vardaxian battle group in the desperate defense of the Sanctum system, home to over 3 billion souls from a dozen different species. The Imperial fleet had sent everything they could spare, but it wasn't enough. The Devourers were coming in waves that blotted out the stars. "All ships, maintain formation," Vraltesh ordered, as another wave of machine vessels approached. His fleet was strong, but the enemy was stronger. They would hold as long as they could, but everyone knew how this would end. Then his communications officer reported something unexpected. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to join our battle line. Vraltesh pulled up the tactical display and was startled to see 30 human warships approaching the system at high speed. It was a significant portion of humanity's entire military, and they were bringing it into the fight without hesitation. Tell them permission granted, and thank them for their assistance, Vraltesh replied. He had his doubts about how much difference they would make, but any help was welcome. The human fleet arrived and immediately began coordinating with the Vardaxian forces. Admiral Lisa Martinez, commanding the human contingent from the flagship UES Indomitable, appeared on Vraltesh's screen. She was older than most of the humans he had encountered, with white hair and the kind of face that spoke of decades of difficult decisions. "Captain Vraltesh, good to see you again," she said briskly. Admiral Martinez had been Commander Martinez during their previous encounter, the officer who had advised him about his predictable patrol patterns. "We've analyzed the Devourer attack patterns. They're efficient but inflexible. They optimize for resource acquisition and threat elimination, but they don't account for irrational behavior." "Irrational behavior?" Vraltesh repeated. "Exactly," Martinez confirmed with something that might have been a smile. "Every species in the galaxy fights logically, minimizing risk and maximizing advantage. The Devourers have adapted to that. But humans don't always fight logically. Sometimes we do stupid, crazy things, and that's going to be our advantage." Before Vraltesh could respond, the Devourer fleet entered the system. Thousands upon thousands of mechanical vessels, each one a nightmare of adaptive technology and overwhelming firepower. The combined fleet opened fire, and space lit up with energy weapons and explosives. For the first hour, the battle followed expected patterns. The defenders inflicted damage but took losses. The Devourers adapted to each new weapon system and countermeasure. It was the same grinding attrition that had characterized every engagement with them. Then the human fleet did something that made every tactical officer in the system think their sensors had malfunctioned. They broke formation and charged directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet. "What are they doing?" Vraltesh's tactical officer shouted. "They'll be torn apart!" But the human ships didn't attack. Instead, they scattered in dozens of different directions, each one broadcasting different signatures, firing weapons in seemingly random patterns, executing maneuvers that made no tactical sense. They were acting like chaos incarnate. And it worked. The Devourers, programmed to respond to logical threats and efficient attack patterns, faltered. Their targeting systems couldn't predict which human vessel to prioritize. Their adaptive algorithms struggled to counter tactics that had no underlying strategy. They were optimized to fight rational opponents, and the humans were deliberately acting irrational. "All ships, follow the human lead," Vraltesh ordered, suddenly understanding. "Break formation. Execute random evasive patterns. Fire at any target presenting itself. Don't try to coordinate." The Vardaxian captains hesitated. Everything in their training screamed against such disorder. But Vraltesh was their commander, and they obeyed. The tight formation dissolved into apparent chaos. The Devourer fleet's efficiency dropped dramatically. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer the unstoppable force they had been. The defenders began scoring significant hits, destroying machine vessels faster than they could adapt. Admiral Martinez's voice cut through the tactical chatter. "All human vessels, execute Omega Protocol." Vraltesh watched in horror as 10 human ships broke away from the main battle and accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer vessel, a massive construct that seemed to coordinate the rest of the fleet. They weren't firing. They were just accelerating. "Admiral, what are your ships doing?" Vraltesh demanded. Martinez's face was grim. "Winning, Captain. Those ships are loaded with fusion warheads and volunteers. Sometimes the only way to kill a monster is to make it choke on you." The 10 human vessels slammed into the Devourer command ship from multiple angles. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then white fire consumed the entire vessel as dozens of fusion warheads detonated simultaneously. The explosion was so massive that it destroyed not only the command ship, but hundreds of Devourer vessels nearby. The remaining machines faltered, their coordination disrupted. The defenders pressed the advantage ruthlessly. Within another hour, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat, damaged beyond their ability to sustain offensive operations. The cost was staggering. Thousands had died on both sides, but the system was saved, and for the first time, the Devourers had been decisively defeated. In the aftermath, Vraltesh stood on the bridge of his battered ship and tried to process what he had witnessed. Humans had sacrificed 10 ships and their crews without hesitation. They had abandoned all tactical doctrine and fought with a combination of chaos and calculation that shouldn't have worked but did. "Captain Vraltesh!" Admiral Martinez appeared on his screen again. She looked exhausted. "I wanted to thank you for trusting us. I know what we did looked insane." "It was insane," Vraltesh replied. "It was also brilliant. You sacrificed your people." "They volunteered," Martinez said quietly. "Every one of them knew what Omega Protocol meant. They chose to be the shield that protected 3 billion lives. That's what humans do. We protect what matters, whatever the cost." Over the following cycles, the pattern repeated across the galaxy. Wherever the Devourers attacked, human forces responded. They fought with creativity that bordered on madness and determination that defied comprehension. They took casualties that would have broken other species and kept fighting. But they didn't fight alone. Inspired by human courage, other species found new resolve. The Vardaxian Empire committed more resources than they had thought possible. The Coherence fleet began experimenting with unconventional tactics. The Harmonious Collective organized relief efforts that kept defensive forces supplied and supported. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten: that sometimes survival required sacrifice. That victory often demanded paying prices that seemed too high until compared to the alternative. That hope and determination could triumph over superior force when combined with willingness to do whatever was necessary. Elder Mothkar watched these developments from his meditation chambers. He was failing now, his ancient body finally giving out after centuries of life. But he was content. His warning had been proven correct, though not in the way most had expected. Humanity was dangerous. But they were dangerous to the galaxy's enemies, not to the galaxy itself. They had brought with them a ferocity and creativity that was desperately needed against a threat that conventional approaches could not defeat. Delegate Frex visited him in his final days. "Elder, you were right about the humans. They are remarkable." "They are necessary," Mothkar corrected gently. The galaxy had grown soft, comfortable, predictable. We needed something to remind us that survival is not guaranteed, that peace must sometimes be defended with violence, that hope requires courage to sustain. "Will they dominate us?" Fricks asked. "Will they become the new power that rules over all others?" Mothkar's multiple eyes focused on her with clarity that belied his physical weakness. "They will if we allow it, but I do not think that is their nature. They do not seek to rule. They seek to thrive, to grow, to protect what they value. If we work with them rather than against them, we will all benefit. And if we oppose them, then we will learn the same lesson the Devourers are learning. That humanity, when pushed to their limits, has no limits. They will do whatever is required, pay whatever price is demanded, and never surrender. That is what makes them dangerous. That is also what makes them invaluable." The war against the Devourers continued for 5 standard years. It was brutal, costly, and transformative. The Galactic Assembly, which had been more of a diplomatic forum than a true alliance, forged itself into something stronger under the pressure of existential threat. Humanity played a disproportionate role in that transformation. Their representatives in the assembly pushed for integrated command structures, shared technology, and mutual defense pacts that went far beyond previous agreements. Some species resisted, wary of ceding sovereignty. But humanity persisted with arguments that were both logical and emotional. Commander Xylith, now promoted to Fleet Coordinator for the Coherence, worked directly with human military advisors to revamp defensive strategies across multiple sectors. She had learned to appreciate their unconventional thinking, even if it still made her uncomfortable. "Your people think sideways," she told General Marcus Chen during one planning session. "Where we see walls, you see doors. Where we see limits, you see opportunities." Chen smiled. "We learned a long time ago that rules are guidelines, not absolutes. The universe doesn't care about our tactical doctrines or strategic principles. It just is. We have to adapt to it, not expect it to adapt to us." This philosophy spread throughout the combined forces. Rigid tactical formations gave way to flexible response groups. Predictable patterns were replaced with adaptive strategies. The Devourers, built to counter logical, efficient opponents, found themselves facing an increasingly illogical and inefficient defense that was paradoxically more effective. The turning point came in the Nexus Cluster, a region of space containing 7 inhabited systems and dozens of colonies. The Devourers committed nearly a third of their total forces to capturing the cluster, recognizing it as strategically vital. If they succeeded, the entire galactic defensive line would collapse. The defense of the Nexus Cluster became legendary. Every species contributed forces. Vardaxian dreadnoughts held the line alongside Coherence energy ships. Harmonious collective support vessels kept everyone supplied and operational. And human strike teams executed operations that looked impossible on paper but worked in practice. Captain Vraltesh, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, commanded the overall defense. It was a testament to how much had changed that a human officer, Admiral Martinez, served as his second-in-command. Their species had been cautious neighbors a few years ago. Now they were comrades in arms. "The Devourers are committing their reserve forces," Martinez reported during the height of the battle. "They're going all in." "Then so are we," Vraltesh replied. He activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, all species hear me. The enemy believes they can break us through sheer force. They are wrong. We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone behind us. For our families, our homes, our future. Today we show the machines that life will always defeat mere existence. All vessels, advance." The combined fleet surged forward. Humans and Vardaxians, Coherence ships and collective support craft, all moving as one unified force. The battle that followed was chaos, but it was purposeful chaos. Every ship knew its role. Every crew trusted their allies. The Devourers broke first. For the first time in their long existence, they encountered something they could not calculate, adapt to, or overcome. They had faced countless civilizations and consumed them all. But they had never faced a galaxy united, led by a species that simply refused to be defeated. When the Devourer fleet retreated from the Nexus Cluster, they were hunted. Human-led strike forces pursued them into deep space, destroying their manufacturing facilities and resource collection operations. It wasn't enough to win defensively. The threat had to be eliminated entirely. It took another 2 years, but eventually the last Devourer construct was destroyed. The machines that had terrorized the galaxy for an unknown span of time were gone, reduced to debris and dormant code. The galaxy that emerged from the war was different from the one that had entered it. The Galactic Assembly had transformed into something closer to a true government, with integrated military forces and genuine cooperation between species. Borders still existed, but they were more like administrative divisions than barriers. Humanity had earned a place of respect and influence that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. They were no longer the curious newcomers, but proven defenders and innovative leaders. But they handled their new status with unexpected grace. Human diplomats pushed for inclusion of smaller species in decision-making. Human military advisors shared tactical innovations freely. Human colonists established outposts in harsh environments that made them ideal for helping other species expand into previously uninhabitable regions. They had proven Elder Mothkar's warning correct. They were dangerous. But the galaxy had learned that danger could be directed, channeled, and allied with, rather than feared and opposed. Years later, a young seer named Kenthari visited the memorial garden that had been established in Elder Mothkar's memory. She was reading the inscription that had been placed there, words that Mothkar had spoken before his death. Humanity is dangerous because they bring change. They do not accept the galaxy as it is. They see what it could be and work toward that vision with relentless determination. Some will resent this, some will fear it, but all will benefit from it if they are wise enough to embrace the opportunity rather than resist it. Ambassador Krell, now old himself and retired from active service, stood beside her. "I dismissed his warning," he said quietly. "I thought him a fearful old fool seeing threats where none existed." "And now?" Kenthari asked. "Now I understand that he was not warning us about an enemy," Krell replied. "He was warning us about a catalyst. Humanity arrived at exactly the moment we needed them, whether we knew it or not. They challenged us to be better than we were." "Do you think they knew?" Kenthari wondered. "Did they understand what they were becoming to us?" Krell considered the question. "I think they were simply being themselves. They did not try to become heroes or saviors. They just faced each challenge as it came, with courage and creativity. That it transformed the galaxy was almost incidental to them." "The seers saw this," Kenthari said, gesturing to the memorial. "Elder Mothkar knew." "He knew they would matter," Krell agreed. "But I don't think even he knew exactly how. The future is not fixed, even for those who can see its possibilities. He warned us to pay attention, and those of us who listened were better prepared when the time came." They stood in silence for a moment, two beings from different species and generations, united in their understanding of how much had changed. Across the galaxy, humanity continued doing what they had always done: building, exploring, asking questions, pushing boundaries. They had colonies on worlds others considered uninhabitable. They had research stations studying phenomena others thought too dangerous. They had trade agreements that somehow managed to benefit everyone involved, even when the terms seemed tilted against them. They were still fractious among themselves, still prone to conflicts and disagreements. But when faced with external threats or shared challenges, they came together with a unity that remained both inspiring and somewhat unsettling to other species. On Earth, in the archives of the United Earth Government, a copy of the Galactic Assembly proceedings from Elder Mothkar's warning was stored. It had been translated into every human language, studied in schools, and analyzed by countless scholars. Humans found it amusing in their way that they had been deemed dangerous before they even knew the Galactic Assembly existed. They also found it humbling. The responsibility of living up to the warning, of being the catalyst for positive change rather than destruction, weighed on them. But they carried that weight the same way they carried everything else, with determination, creativity, and an unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today if they worked hard enough to make it so. The seers had warned of humanity. Their words had been dismissed, and then events had proven the warning correct, though in ways that brought growth rather than destruction. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, and their impact would echo through the ages. Not as conquerors or destroyers, but as partners, defenders, and perpetual reminders that adaptation and courage could overcome any challenge. Elder Mothcar had seen the danger and tried to prepare others for it. In the end, the danger became salvation. The warning became prophecy fulfilled, and humanity became not the threat the galaxy feared, but the ally it needed. The story was not over. It was only beginning. But now, at least, it was a story being written together, with all species contributing their strengths to face whatever challenges the future held. And if new threats emerged, as they inevitably would, the galaxy now had something it had lacked before. It had humanity, with all their dangerous hope, reckless courage, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The seers had warned, the galaxy had learned, and together they would face whatever came next.